Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching the John Woodard Show. We have the great pleasure to interview Third District Congressman Greg Murphy. We're going to talk about a lot of things about the current state of the circumstances in Washington and right here in the district as well. Congressman, thank you for allowing me to interview you today.
Good morning, John.
Good afternoon. Is it still afternoon?
It's not quite.
Well, whatever. There's a lot going on up in Washington, and nobody really knows. I mean, you get some sense of what the troubles are with the new administration from what you hear on the news, but you can't really get very much of it in 15 and 20-second sound bites. What is your general take on the problems that we're dealing with up there?
Well, I'll speak to two specific things, John. Number one, let me just make very clear, what happened on January 6th was a tragedy in our nation. We had basically thugs and criminals that overran the Capitol building, and that's not to be tolerable. That's a sacred place.
Not.
But that said, Nancy Pelosi and her cabal have taken full advantage of what occurred to create a police state in Washington, D.C., where there's 10-foot razor wire, where there are, a couple thousand National Guardsmen that are there guarding the Capitol when the Capitol Police have said multiple times there is no credible threat. So she's continued to have to push a narrative of fear. And in doing so also, she has pushed a narrative of fear to her own caucus, where she's essentially changed the rules of Congress, where she doesn't bring things through committee as much anymore, and things are just pushed to the floor, where she is basically, hogtied, if you will, her entire caucus into pushing her particular agenda. There is no debate. There is no bipartisan discussions. And we live in a dictatorship. And then I'll move that over to what's going on with the Biden administration. Not quite sure who's pulling the strings over there. Biden talked about unity, and that was in my opinion, utter nonsense, because we saw him literally walk away from the microphone of talking unity and sign a bunch of executive orders that have done just the opposite. And he has pushed through things that have no bipartisan support. So his talk about unity in this country was merely lip service, and his actions have been entirely opposite. That's what's going on in Washington, D.C.
In addition to which, they're pushing these high-dollar bills through reconciliation instead of going through the committee process and ladening our future generations with huge amounts of debt.
John, the $1.9 trillion package, the first package, the CARES package, was something that was done with bipartisan support and bipartisan negotiation, which is what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to listen to the other side. You don't necessarily agree. But they found common ground on a lot of things. And it had unanimous support. Not unanimous support, but it had full bipartisan support. This last one, the $1.9 trillion package, was never discussed anywhere. It was a take it or leave it, and the Republicans left it, because only 8% or so of the package itself actually went to COVID relief. Most of it, a lot of it anyway, went to bail out states and municipalities, primarily run by Democrats, that had been fiscally irresponsible for the last quarter century and run their particular municipalities or states into the ground financially to bail them out. And Pelosi wanted to put in $112 million in, quote, COVID relief to build a tunnel in the Bay Area. I mean, that has nothing to do with COVID relief. And so what we've seen is basically a hijacking of our children and our children's future to basically fund a far-left liberal wish list.
Add to which the problem with the teachers' unions and children in school. They say they want to pay attention to the science, and then when the science doesn't say what they want, they ignore it.
Well, it's been a sad travesty. John, and I'll readily admit, when this first came out, February, March, I was an advocate for closing things down until we knew more about this.
Absolutely.
But as the science has dictated and as the science has shown, there was an excellent South Korea study well, almost close to a year ago, that showed that kids under age 10 and 12 are exceedingly low risk for this virus. And what the teachers have done, and this is, I don't even think it's the majority of teachers, because I really don't, because we've run our parochial schools, we've run our private schools, they've run the European schools without any problems. But what the teachers' unions have done is try to use this crisis to gather for a further foundation for negotiations in the future. So they're basically pawning their children's futures and risking them for their own gains. We have now probably a year for kids, especially in minority communities, especially in rural communities, that will never be able to be returned again. Never, because of their selfish desires. You know, we want everybody to be safe, no doubt. And now the teachers are getting vaccinated, now they're saying, well, you have to move the goalposts, you have to move something else. Enough is enough. Enough is enough. We need to get our kids back in school.
I was very interested to learn when I was doing some research on critical race theory. I was very interested to learn that the North Carolina Association of Educators has a Black Lives Matter lady as the president, and a avowed revolutionary with the Liberation Road organization, which is a Chinese-supported organization that's in charge of our schools or in charge of our teachers in this country, in this state. Do you know anything about that?
Well, let's look at this, John. Look at what Stalin did. Look at what was done in China with re-education camps. Look what was done in 1930s in Germany. This is all about indoctrination. It's all about indoctrination of a particular philosophy. You know, for the most part, the nuclear family has been attacked, and they feel like they should supplant what the morality is that you get from a nuclear family into pushing their own agenda, their own philosophy, their own morality through the school system. And critical race theory, you know, the critical theory actually was started by Marxists. And now applying this to race, where everybody needs to be divided into a particular silo, I think is a sad thing for our country. And sadly enough, so much of that is going on in our public school systems, where there has been a flight of individuals from public schools out to private schools because they don't want their children to become indoctrinated. We had some of this nonsense that just happened here in Pitt County this past week, where a 7th grade teacher was trying to push a particular liberal agenda in on her 7th grade students. And fortunately, a parent was very upset about that, went to the school board, and that teacher subsequently has, I think they should be removed, but retracted their lesson plan. But they're going to push and push and push until they try to indoctrinate all of our children. We see this in higher education all the time now, all the time. Free speech has been attacked.
Well, in fact, in our last interview, I asked you about the indoctrination of our children and what could be done about it. And as I recall your answer, it was almost nothing that could be done. Doesn't the legislature have some monetary or other controls that they can apply?
Oh, sure. I mean, but you know, the national government, and you know, I don't believe that education should be federalized anyway. That's not in our Constitution at all. And so the federal government has very limited power, should have very constitutional limited power. The Biden administration has tried to federalize everything. You know, one size fits all. But I'm sorry, what's taught in Pittsburgh does not need to be what's taught in Iowa, in Des Moines. There are different local characteristics. I do think that the state legislature has purse strings. I think they should be used. I know of several particular colleges, one in particular, that I know have pushed a social agenda, and it's not in the universities and colleges now, oftentimes, and some professors feel it's not how to think that they teach, it's rather what to think that they teach. And that's sadly enough being reflected in some of the outcomes in the young adults. And they don't teach, they teach a revisionist history too. They don't want to learn from the things of the past. They want to cancel the things of the past. It's a tragedy in our day.
The 1619 Project is a complete redo of history, and I don't know where that leads when you teach this to young children. by the time they have the opportunity, they have the mental capacity for reason, that's the framework that they start with.
Well, the sad thing is, every child should be develop critical thinking habits, to teach them so that they have a structure for lifelong learning. And when you're only teaching one side of an issue, it's brainwashing. It's pure, plain and simple. You're not teaching how to think, you're teaching what to think. And I think it's a tragedy in this day.
What do you think about the current situation with COVID? I hear today that the president wants people to go back into wearing masks, and he's criticizing states like Florida and Texas for their reckless behavior, and that cases are going up and all of that. So where do we stand with that?
The pandemic is a very complex issue. It's a very complex issue.
Every important issue has a lot of complexity.
And as I said, I was very much into shutting everything down.
Yes,
in fact, I urged Governor Cooper to do it the day before he did, whether he listened to me or whether he was just going to do it whatever, who knows. However, we've learned a lot since then. We've learned that, we've had now 3 surges of this virus. The last surge, which was our greatest one, and the last surge came in the wake of mask mandates, closures, and all these other things. So we had the greatest surge since then. There's a part of this that just we have to accept this is a highly infectious virus, but there's also a part of this that because of our actions from the pandemic, we have ruined people's lives. We have caused an increase in mental health cases. We've caused an increase in suicide. We've caused an increase in diagnoses of other types of things, heart disease, cancer, to be delayed because of this. Now, if you look at a very important curve, I'm not advocating masks, this, that, and the other stuff, but if you look at a very important curve, you'll see that states that had mask mandates and states that did not have mask mandates, if you look at the percentage of COVID positive cases per 100,000 since this has started, comparing those two types of states, they're essentially identical. So do masks prevent everything? The answer is no. Is it a good idea still? I think if you haven't been vaccinated, if you're out in a crowd, I still think it's a good idea. I don't think it's mandated. And the good thing is that the latest statistic I was reading yesterday is that 72% of at-risk Americans, those over age 65, have now been vaccinated. The ones who are at risk, the ones who are under age 25, thankfully, they are exceedingly low risk. I think our colleges should have been opened up a long time ago. That's because of a lot of liberal professors that wanted to stay home and not teach their children, which was the wrong message. They've hurt our children. And so, I do believe there's light at the end of the tunnel. Not all physicians agree 100% with Fauci. I think a lot more people have been exposed to this virus than understand they've been exposed to this virus. And I would also continue to urge that people get vaccinated.
Fauci spent an awful lot of federal money, some of which was authorized, some of which wasn't. That went through a New York company that was basically laundering that money and then sending it on to China. So and we knew that there was some interest on the part of American biological physicians that were encouraging development of gain of function with some of these viruses. How in the world can we? Is it realistic for us to participate financially with millions of dollars to support that kind of research?
Well, John, China is not our friend. We are at war with China.
Of course we are.
And to be honest with you, in the last year, China has gained a great advantage over us because they've seen how they can introduce a virus into this country and cripple this nation without ever firing a shot.
Absolutely.
And there's still a lot of debate. I don't care what WHO says. There's still a lot of debate about the origins of this virus. I don't think we'll ever truly know because the Chinese government is not forthright in honesty about what's happened. This has just obviously been a tragedy for our nation because as I feared, when I told the governor this, the governor of North Carolina, that I did not want this to become a political issue, and unfortunately, that happened.
Yeah, that fell on deaf ears.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I've got to ask you about a couple of questions that are probably not going to be comfortable, but I have to do it.
All right.
You were criticized by some people for supporting tearing down of Civil War statues, and included in that bill was a provision that was kind of tucked in out of the way, where that would allow police officers to enter people's homes and seize their guns without a warrant. You've been criticized about these things. Tell me what your point of view is.
I didn't advocate tearing down. That's inaccurate. Confederate statues. There are two statues in the in Statuary Hall in Washington, D.C. Both were put there by racist Democrats, and those ideals are not what we, the people of North Carolina, believe. And so, in doing so, removing them, we put them in people like Billy Graham, who actually do embody what the people of North Carolina believe, not what racist Democrats did long ago.
Also, some criticism has come your way for supporting the impeachment of the president, the second impeachment.
I don't understand what that means. That's not true. I voted against the impeachment of the president.
Is that right?
Yeah,
well,
I don't know I don't know where that came from. I voted against his impeachment.
You know, when you're out and about like I am, going all over and talking to all kinds of people, some people say good things, some people say bad things, and you know. Well,
that's a totally inaccurate statement. I voted against impeaching Donald Trump.
I know we're running short of time. What about the issue of where do we stand on your position about the coming elections here in this state? People have said to me privately that they think that you'd be a good candidate to run for that Senate seat vacated by Richard Burr. You have any thoughts about that?
I think I'm happy doing what I'm doing for Eastern North Carolina right now. There are a few candidates I know they're going to step forward, and I know Mark Walker has. I'll just say point blank, I'm not interested in that at this moment in time.
Well, I'm not surprised. What do you think about his Mark's chances against Ms. Trump?
I don't think, well, we all know what Ms. Trump's doing. She's joined on Fox, and then she has a tantalizing thing hither and yon. I know that probably one other member of the U.S. House is going to run. He's just not announced it, but I'm not going to say that. And possibly some other former state political figures are going to throw their name in the hat.
Well, last, of course, is the big Shawana here in North Carolina, and that's the governor's race. A lot of good candidates have been talked about, but you know, I'm really not confident that our lieutenant governor is ready to step up to take that challenge yet. You got any suggestions?
Well, 2024 is still several years away, and we hopefully get the best Republican possible there.
Well, that's a good political answer. Well, you've got to go, and I'm running a short of time. I could talk to you for a lot longer, but we'll just go ahead and wrap it up. It was very nice to see you again. Thank you so much for letting me come over and talk to you.
Great. Thank you.